March 15th, 44 BC. 23 stab wounds, 60 men, 1 plan, 0 hesitation. And the most strategically gifted commander in Roman history never saw it coming. Everyone knows what happened on the Ides of March, but almost nobody knows why it actually happened. And the answer, when you see it, is going to change how you think about everything we covered in part 1. Because the man who built the most loyal army in history using one psychological weapon forgot to use it on the 60 men who killed him. You're watching Infamyx. Join me today as we investigate the one decision Julius Caesar made that turned his greatest weapon against himself. Let's start with what the history books give you. Caesar became too powerful. The Senate feared a king. Brutus and Cassius rallied 60 senators, men who called themselves liberatores, liberators, and on the Ides of March, they surrounded Caesar at the theater of Pompey and stabbed him 23 times. That's the story. And it's not wrong exactly, but it answers the wrong question. It tells you what happened. It doesn't tell you why it happened when it did. Why those 60 men? Why that moment? Why Caesar, who had survived a decade of war, crossed the Rubicon against impossible odds, ended a civil war, and faced down a mutinous legion alone, walked into that room without a bodyguard, and died on the floor? The standard explanation is power. Caesar had accumulated too much of it. He was appointed dictator perpetuo, dictator in perpetuity, in early 44 BC. He was receiving honors that blurred the line between man and God. The senators saw a king in the making and moved to stop him. That explanation is satisfying. It's also incomplete. Because Rome had survived powerful men before. Sulla had been dictator. Marius had held unprecedented power. The Republic had bent without breaking under both of them. What made Caesar different wasn't his power. It was what he did with the people who had to watch him use it. If you watched part 1 of this series, and if you didn't, I'll link it above, you know what made Caesar genuinely dangerous. Not his tactics, not his intelligence, not even his courage, though he had all three in abundance. What made Caesar nearly impossible to stop was radical proximity. The deliberate, systematic elimination of distance between himself and the people whose loyalty he needed. He learned his soldiers' names. He ate with them. He shared their conditions. He made every man in his army feel personally seen by the most powerful commander in the Roman world. That weapon was so effective, it turned ordinary soldiers into men who would die for him personally. It ended a legion mutiny without a single execution. It held a collapsing battle line at the Sabus when nothing else could. Caesar knew, better than anyone alive, that human beings are not moved by power. They are moved by recognition. By the feeling that someone of consequence has looked at them and seen them specifically. He knew this. And then he stopped using it. Not with his soldiers. He never lost that. Not with the Roman public. He was beloved in the streets until the day he died. He stopped using it with the Senate. The 60 men who would eventually surround him, men of immense pride, ancient family names, and deep investment in the idea that Rome was a republic governed by its aristocracy, Caesar treated them as an inconvenience. Not openly, not cruelly, something almost worse than cruelty. He treated them as irrelevant. Let's be specific, because the specific moments matter. In 44 BC, just weeks before the assassination, the Senate came to Caesar in formal procession to announce a new round of honors. Extraordinary honors. Divine honors, some of them. Caesar received them sitting down. He did not stand. He did not acknowledge the procession with the deference Roman custom demanded. He sat in his chair at the temple of Venus Genitrix and let them come to him. His advisors were horrified. They knew immediately what this signaled, not to Rome's enemies, not to the public, but to the men standing in that procession. men of consular rank, men whose entire identity was built on the dignity of the Roman aristocracy. He made them feel small. This was not an isolated incident. Caesar had a habit in this period of conducting public business while walking, dictating letters, receiving delegations, reviewing documents, all in motion, all simultaneously. The message was efficiency. The experience for the senators trying to conduct formal business with him was, "You do not have my full attention. You are one of many things happening at once." Compare that to the Caesar of the Gallic campaigns, the Caesar who stopped mid-walk to crouch beside a soldier sharpening his sword, the Caesar who sat in the rain sharing bread, the Caesar who moved through camp slowly, unhurriedly, giving every man the experience of being the only person in the world for that moment. That Caesar gave people his complete attention as a weapon. The Caesar of 44 BC had stopped paying that price. And here is what the standard narrative misses entirely. The conspiracy against Caesar was not primarily ideological. Cassius, the driving force behind it, was not a principled Republican. He was a man who felt personally humiliated by Caesar on multiple documented occasions. Brutus was not acting on philosophy. He was acting on the accumulated weight of feeling that the Rome he understood, the Rome where men like him mattered, was being casually dismissed by a man who no longer needed to pretend they did. The ideology came after. The injury came first. Caesar's assassination was not organized around an idea. It was organized around a feeling. The feeling of being made invisible by someone who once knew exactly how to make you feel seen. Caesar knew. Not about the specific conspiracy, though there were warnings, multiple warnings, the most famous being the soothsayer's "Beware the Ides of March," but about the general condition of the Senate. He knew they resented him. He knew the sitting down incident had caused damage. He knew Cassius specifically harbored grievances. He knew, and he made a deliberate choice. In early 44 BC, Caesar disbanded his personal bodyguard. He sent away the Spanish soldiers who had protected him throughout the Civil War period. When asked why, he gave an answer recorded by multiple ancient sources, an answer that reads, across 2,000 years, as the most expensive miscalculation in Roman history. He said it was better to die once than to live always in fear of death. That is a remarkable statement from a man who had spent a decade studying human psychology as a military instrument. Caesar understood fear. He understood how to use it, how to remove it from his own men, and how to weaponize it against his enemies. What he didn't account for, what the man who built loyalty through radical proximity somehow failed to see, was that disbanding his bodyguard was not a gesture of fearlessness. It was a gesture of contempt. It said, "You senators are not a threat worth guarding against. You are not dangerous enough to require my attention. I do not need to take you seriously." To men who were already feeling invisible, already nursing the injury of being treated as irrelevant by the most powerful man in the world, that gesture was not brave. It was an invitation. Caesar also ignored the warnings with a casualness that suggests he had fundamentally misread the room. The soothsayer on the steps, Calpurnia's dreams the night before, a written note pressed into his hand as he entered the theater of Pompey that morning, a note he never read, still folded in his hand when they found him on the floor. He had survived everything: the Rubicon, Pharsalus, the mutiny of the 9th. He had walked into rooms full of danger his entire adult life and walked out the other side. He had become, without knowing it, a man who no longer believed the room could be dangerous. And the room was full of 60 men who had decided to prove him wrong. So here is the question, part 1 left open and part 2 has to answer. How does the man who understood human loyalty better than anyone in the ancient world fail to maintain the loyalty of 60 men who had the power to kill him? The answer is the oldest trap in the history of leadership. Radical proximity works in every direction, or it fails in the most important one. Caesar used it to build an army. He used it to win a civil war. He used it to govern a restless Roman public. But proximity is not a tool you deploy selectively. It is not something you offer to the people you need and withhold from the people you think you've already won. Because the people you think you've already won are precisely the ones who will notice the absence. The senators did not conspire against Caesar because he was powerful. They conspired against Caesar because he had once, in the way that all great politicians do, made them feel that their support mattered, that their dignity was being honored, that the republic they represented was being respected even as it was being quietly dismantled. And then, when he no longer needed their support, when the civil war was won and the consulship was secured and the dictatorship was permanent, he stopped. He stopped seeing them. And 60 men who had once felt seen by the most charismatic figure of their generation experienced what people always experience when that kind of attention is withdrawn. They did not feel neutral about it. They felt its absence like a wound. Caesar's greatest military insight, that human beings fight for the person who makes them feel personally seen, contains within it a warning he never heeded. The same psychology that makes a man run toward danger for a commander who knows his name will make a senator pick up a knife for a cause that gives him back his dignity. Caesar created both armies. He just forgot he'd created the second one. So here is what the Ides of March actually was. Not a Republican uprising. Not a clash of ideology. Not even a betrayal, though it has been called that for 2,000 years. It was the logical conclusion of a man who mastered one of the most powerful principles in human psychology, and then exempted himself from it. Radical proximity is not a tactic you use on the way up and retire when you arrive. It is the price of staying alive at the top. Caesar paid it with his soldiers. He paid it with the Roman public. He stopped paying it with the Senate. And the Senate collected. The tragedy of Julius Caesar is not that he was too powerful. It is that he was too certain. Certain that the loyalty he had built was permanent. Certain that the resentment he was generating was manageable. Certain that the room full of men with knives was not actually dangerous. The man who taught us that every soldier fights for the person who makes them feel seen died because he forgot to make 60 men feel seen. That is not ancient. That is not obsolete. That is the mistake being made right now, by leaders in every field, in every country, at every level of power. The moment you stop needing someone is the moment you need to double down on making them feel needed. Caesar never learned that. And on the Ides of March, in the theater of Pompey, on the floor beside a statue of his old rival Pompey, surrounded by 60 men who had once respected him, he paid the price. 2,000 years later, we remember his name. He forgot theirs.